Okay, so we've got our panel on with the stabilizer underneath. I've got my, excuse my fingers, I've got my free motion foot on. So I haven't gone through this, but it's on some of the other videos if you're working your way through. But you can use something like a darning foot, like I'm using here, or you can use, I'll just move this out of the way a second. So you can either use the darning foot or a quilting foot. This is an open toe one. So the disadvantage I find is that this open bit has a tendency to get caught up, and I don't find that very helpful. You can get metal ones, like so. The disadvantage with the metal ones, I can't get it into focus, is that you can't see through them. So the plastic ones are a little bit easier to use in that respect. And you can also use ones like this, and this clips on instead of a foot, which should be ideal really, but I just couldn't get on with it. It didn't work for me. So it is a case of finding what works for you. You can also get needles which are sprung, and then you can put those on any machine. I've never actually tried them myself, but I know that you can get them. So you then need to set your machine up into however your machine does. So if I just move the camera a little bit up so you can see on mine. So on mine it's pretty easy. There's a button here. I'll press that. In fact, I'll show you, and it gives different options for free motion. So that's easy. And all I do reduce my tension a little bit from where it's normally sat. Other ones, it can be at the side of the machine here. They can be a button to our slider, which basically what you're looking to do is move the feed dogs down so that you're not gripping the fabric, so you can then move where you want. And on mine it automatically sets it, otherwise you can just set the stitch length to 0 manually on your machine. But find the manual for your machine and look what it says. You know, if you haven't got the manual anymore, you can look them up online now. Google is an amazing thing. I regularly look up where people can't do them. I regularly find their machine and look up their manual for them, so that you can just look these up. So I threaded up in a taupe brown. So this is DS891. So I either use this generally, or I use this one, which is a saddle brown. But it's a little bit bolder, so this one I wanted a slightly softer look to it. So with that, all that to do, we'll get going. So we basically are trying to outline sew. So I'll start sewing, and then as I'm talking, so that you're not just sat here. Well, I'm not just sat here. So what I'm doing is I'm going to just sew a couple of millimeters away. Sorry, a millimeter away from the edge, so it basically as close as I can. Sew a couple of bits and then carefully trim that thread off, because otherwise what happens is as you move around you kind of drag it and it lifts up some of the other pieces that you've laid down, which is annoying. So I'm starting on these badges, and I'm just going to work around. It's slightly easier, although obviously with free motion you can sew whichever direction you want. It is still slightly easier to sew towards yourself because you can see much better where you're going. So I'm just gonna go around all these shapes. They're not glued. I didn't really mention that, but they aren't glued. They're not pinned. They are just laid down on the fabric. So they can move. So just take care when you're doing them. If you notice something's shifted, then just put it back into position, and otherwise try not to worry about it too much. That one just moved a little bit. I've had this on my sewing bench for about a week, I think, so things have had the opportunity to move around a bit. So I'm going to go round all the edges of all these pieces, and it is time consuming, and it is my least favourite bit of the whole thing, because it never looks very good. It looks really nice when you've got the embroidery on, and this bit just always looks a bit rubbish. But I try and hold the thing that I always think, gosh, this looks rubbish, and then it always looks nice when I finish. So if you're going around you basically want to go around everything once and then go around a second time. But if you're going around like a little excursion up this bit, say, it's worth at this point just going around the second time while you're there, rather than, so just go around everything. I'm going to just pause at the second, and then I'll go around faster on the camera, and I'll put my music back on so I can, because I don't like to listen to the music at the same time as recording. So you can see me whiz around everything. I am speeding this up. It's a time-consuming bit. You need to sew nice and evenly. Try not to sew too fast. So this is unspeeded, and you can see how you can hear the speed of the machine. Okay, it's ding, 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 ding. It's not like this that a lot of people do when they're doing free motion. And the problem is when you're doing it that fast, it's very easy for it to kind of go wibbly. And you haven't, it's hard to get the control. The fabric only moves as this foot lifts up, so it's kind of being held and let go. So if you've got it so that you're really flying on the machine, it's kind of almost as if it's not being held, and I think that doesn't help with the wibbliness. So just stitching slower works better. Something I didn't mention, I have got an embroidery needle on here, and the embroidery needle's got a little bit bigger hole, which I think makes slightly less friction and just makes it the draw through a little easier. And I did turn my machine tension down on the bobbins. See if I can find one. I use pre-wound bobbins, which I know everyone, that's maybe not the most environmentally friendly ones, so I just squeeze them in. You see, there they are. So I use these, which are by Wonderful specialty thread. So I use an L, but you size, so you have to make sure when you're buying them that you buy the right ones. And I generally use either a grey, though I've picked up a multi-set there. I generally use either a grey, like that, so they're DB103, or a cream, but I don't know where I've put a box of those ones. The cream ones are, there you go, 112. I use those for when I'm doing something very light. I used to pre-wind, make my own bobbins up, but I found that these do eliminate an awful lot of tension issues. And since I swapped over to them, kind of think, because someone recommended them to me, and I was kind of like, oh, they're really expensive. Oh, do you know? And I've just made a mess of that. So I think I'm not quite sure what I did then, but what's happened there is, I think, as I just started, sometimes what happens is that it goes through, but it kind of loops underneath, and it didn't catch the bobbin thread underneath, but instead it kind of went to the wrong side of the needle, so then effectively I just knotted it itself, which I think is I wasn't paying attention, having just said about how good these bobbins are. But anyway, since swapping the bobbins, I found I had much fewer problems, and in general, if I'm quilting, then you go through a couple of bobbins pretty quickly, but for doing these, I probably go through a pack of those bobbins, I don't know, maybe twice a year. So it's not a huge amount of plastic, and it's not a huge amount of cost, and it is very nice when you just grab one, your bobbin runs out, you just grab another one and put it in. It's very nice. So if you do consistently have problems with tension, those are wound perfectly. There's never going to be a point where the tension changes or anything, and it does make a difference. So I would definitely recommend them. And I have a set of multicoloured ones, but I mainly use those from dressmaking rather than doing these embroideries. So anyway, I'm going to just whiz around all these. So I think we've spoken about the needles, the tension, how to set your machine up, what we're doing. So let's just go on with it. Okay, so that's the somewhat tedious bit done. So some of these pieces are quite small, so don't worry. Oh, I'm just so that you can actually see me. So I'm just trimming the thread short on the front where there's been places where I've been jumping to. So yeah, some of these pieces were pretty small, so don't worry too much if you miss some edges. We'll make sure that we catch them on the when we're using the variegated threads and bring out any bits which I made a bit of a mistake on. Let's have a look how much ones we got. Okay, so the next bit we need to do is just add in any extra bits. So I did some of them as I went along. So like I added the shape here of these daffodils. Any other bits that I did? I divided the paw here. So I added his nose on. So I'm just going to add this one's nose in. Okay, and then the eyes. Now I did try and give a little bit of help so that the actual fabric is shaped slightly here. So I'm just going to do a small circle. So, and then try and match that on the other side. Again, using there's a slight shape to the fabric there. That wasn't so bad. And then this one's a bit easier because there's only one eye, so you haven't really got to worry about matching them up. Looks like I actually missed that edge there. I got the one underneath, but I think it all shifted slightly when I was doing it, but I'm not going to worry. I also somehow managed to just completely miss this edge. I just sewed a different line than it was supposed to be, but never mind. Right, so I think the rest of it we'll be doing with threads, so we'll just end this one off and trim these ones neat, and then I'm going to go and take a break. Now those eyes a little bit, I'm just going to lift. Am I going to lift or raise? One of those eyes is slightly higher than the other. I think I'm going to lower this one. So I'm just going to stitch a second circle that's a little bit lower. And I'll just hide the other one with some thread later on. But it gives me something to work from. Okay, so I don't know if you can see there, but I've just sewn an eye and then another one. So I could unpick that bit, but I don't think it's going to matter. I think we can hide that with thread. Right, oh, we've made here, we're just going to add this tulip stem. I think the other stems are pretty thin, so I'll probably just add those in with thread later on, but the tulip stem is reasonably noticeable, so we'll do that then. Okay, so, right, okay. So yeah, I'm going to take a break, and I would suggest that you take a break unless you'd like just come back, because that bit is all quite tiring, and you can tell from, if yours doesn't look great at the minute, then, you know, join the club, because mine doesn't either. We're going to get there, it's going to look swell, okay?